Hi everyone, this is Ricky Spencer and welcome to another of our wonderful episodes for Quests by Community, Our Health Matters. And we're going to be speaking with Rachael Wass. She is the CEO of Meaningful Aging in Australia. And we're going to find out why it's important to think of our aging process something from a different lens that encapsulates spirituality, well-being, resilience, and thriving. Nothing to fear but fear itself. Welcome, Rachael.
Oh, Woman Jaika, absolutely delightful to be here. I've been really looking forward to meeting you, Ricky. So wonderful to see you today and exploring a topic that I think is something that, the two of us, I think we can unpack it and demystify some aspects and really think about aging as something that is part of our life trajectory, but is something to embrace.
Before we begin that journey, Rachael, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. What got you to where you are today, being in this space?
That's a question that, when I reflect back on my life, it all seems to make sense, isn't it? It's interesting sometimes when you have that perspective. But I think if I, really look at the most recent sort of times that brought me into the space of aging, was really, I was working in a corporate role. I'm a long-term Buddhist practitioner, Ricky, and so, I've always had a sense of thinking about how do we bring compassion into the work that we do. And I just finished a degree of commerce, which sounds very different to what I do now. But I remember looking at my computer screen and there was this beautiful advertisement. It was actually a Japanese anime. And it was a story about a fable or an allegory about ancient Japan and how at times of famine, great famine, many centuries ago, that there was a sense that older people were no longer productive. And so what would happen is that the older person would say to the family, look, I'm no longer contributing anymore. Please take me to the top of the mountain, and essentially would allow themselves to actually pass away at the top of the mountain, to kind of sacrifice themselves. So, this beautiful anime story, although that sounds quite tragic, and it is, the concept though was very fascinating because the son, who I assume it was a son, took the grandmother on his back, working his way up the mountain, and along the way the grandmother is breaking twigs, and it's you see her saying, look, please go this way because this is the safest way to go back down the mountain. If you go that way you'll find water, so if you're thirsty. And so, of course, it goes up the mountain to where the snow is. And then the son says, no, I can't do this. And of course, he brings Grandma back down the mountain because he's recognized that productiveness of that older person in society and community is not always measured by, how many grains of rice they can pick. So that got me hooked, Ricky, and I found out that story was an advertisement for a Master of Aging. And I jumped straight in, and I really have not looked back. It has led me to, after I finished that degree, meeting the most wonderful people along the way, learning a lot about the process of aging and about all the different aspects of that. I decided I wanted to specialize in it, so I left my corporate work behind. At the same time, interestingly enough, things happen in life where there's a kind of sliding door moment, and at the time I had also come to support my dear elderly mum, and Mum came to live with me and I became her carer for 15 years. right through to her death. And that journey as well was something that I think was an incredible tandem kind of learning process. And I've come to find this as being something that really is, I feel like it's the best job I've ever had in my life, to now be the CEO of Meaningful Aging Australia.
One of the things that sort of resonates for you speaking is this fear that a lot of people have in our society about aging. Where do you think that comes from?
We were speaking earlier off camera about, you know, our journeys and connections with, say, for example, aged care. And the system has gone through many changes, but certainly I think it's fair to say at the time frame that we were speaking of, which was, you know, we're probably talking 10, 15, 20 years ago, aged care was quite a place where, unless you knew of someone who was older, you might visit them there once or twice if someone was in residential aged care. But it often was very much a poor cousin, and so people were kind of shut away a lot. And we know now that even still today, there are many people living in residential aged care who still don't have visitors. You know, there's those numbers of, I think it's about 40% who never get a visitor. And so we've kind of institutionalized aged care. We've also got a society that, you know, really values beauty and youth. And I guess something shiny and new, instead of perhaps understanding that all of us are going to age. If we think about the kinds of things that make us human, as soon as we're born, we are essentially dying. Our cells are turning over, and eventually those cells, as they're replicating in our body, it's going to happen to everyone, that, you know, it becomes less and less perfect as it goes on. The time's really come now to understand, just like that story of the older person kind of sacrificing themselves for others, is to really start to understand more deeply about the benefits of aging, about embracing that process, about all of us feeling more comfortable, you know, and recognizing our own self-talk about aging. So many times, and I know, look, I'm guilty of it myself, where I've said to a friend, oh, you look younger than what you are. And, you know, I think it's good to have a narrative where we say, I am really happy with the age that I am, and I love who I am today. And I think that ebbs out to others. You know, so I'm very interested in that sort of concept of us embracing, you know, I'm proud of my grey hair, Ricky. I'm proud of, you know, I feel much more at peace with myself as I'm aging. You know, I think there's so much that we can tap into.
For me now, I feel I'm so happy with who I am as a person. I'm embracing this age. I don't have regrets of thinking, oh, I wish I was, you know, 20 years younger or 30 years younger. I'm enjoying this time of my life, and I'm seeing this as a journey. And that journey is about exploring what trying to make sense, understanding that the superficiality of wrinkles, and that they're just a part of growing, and embracing where we are. And although the body may not work the way it used to, looking at ways to how can we build comfort and care and flourish. And I refuse to, and I speak to a lot of people now my age who refuse to stop studying, refuse to stop living, stop working, to stop planning for the rest of their life, because life is about the moment, making every moment count. And I guess that takes us now to that notion of meaningful aging. And tell us a little bit about the organisation. What does Meaningful Aging in Australia stand for?
It's an organisation that started as a crowdsourced, essentially, group of aged care providers that said, look, we think that emotional well-being for older people is in fact a really essential ingredient to person-centered care, to aspects of holistic care. And so the organisation developed, and it worked on research and combining resources for practical tools and resources for the sector. And that's essentially come to a point where we have a number of aged care providers, professionals, people who are interested, older people themselves, who now are, I guess, part of our membership and affiliates, and wonderful partner organisations, universities, other associations, NATSIAC, the First Nations Aged Care Group, LGBTIQ+ Health, Australian Gerontology Association, many organisations that also appreciate this aspect. And really that comes to, I guess, why spirituality. Spirituality is also something that I think people misunderstand sometimes. And I know in our conversations too that this is something that I think is a superpower for people to understand, particularly as we age. Often as we age, there's that process of those liminal spaces that we find ourselves in where, there's a change in our lives, whether that's our health or our career or our partnerships or our health or even just kind of our mental outlook. There's moments there where we've got kind of reflective questions, the meaning of life. And these are the aspects that I think Meaningful Aging Australia is really looking at, is to say that, there are many things that we can look at in terms of re-engaging ourselves, recreating ourselves, restoring parts of ourselves, looking at some of those existential questions that come up. So that fascinates me, both as a Buddhist practitioner. Something I feel quite strongly about is how Buddhism has helped me, look at life, look at different things in life. But also I think spirituality is something that kind of it's something that I think we should demystify a little, Ricky.
How is spirituality, say, different from religion?
To answer that, we really need to look at what is the definition of spirituality. And Meaningful Aging Australia looks at one of the most accepted definitions, which it comes from Pulcheski, a well-known kind of luminary researcher in the world of research in spirituality. And what Pulcheski's work talks about is our inner world and our connection to a number of different domains. And those domains can be things like nature, creativity, it's looking at connections to community, connections to our internal world, and connection to awe and wonder and something greater. And faith can be part of that something greater. So it's really not one or the other, Ricky. I think it is where we can consider this as a whole spectrum of connections. And lots of people now are quite embracing of things such as meditation and yoga practices, as well as, thinking about the diversity of our population in Australia. Not all of us are coming from, one particular background or faith. There is such a variety of, us as Australians that, spirituality in a more general sense like that can actually embrace everybody. So that's what really appeals to me particularly. I see, healthcare practitioners and lots of people talking about aspects such as social prescribing. And social prescribing is something that really does look at things like that, our intergenerational connections, our community, who is our family members, our pets even, those sort of connections. Essentially what really draws all of it together is what actually fills our cup, Ricky?
Well, for me, it is about the human essence. And I guess a lot of it comes from my Indigenous ways of being and seeking and searching for that lost connections. And it's about really seeing care culture. How do can I give back to the country as much as I can? How can I support? And it could be as a simple thing as supporting the mother bird who has nested with her baby birds to make sure she can be safe, have access to water, to food, to seeing if my neighbours are okay, if they can, how I can support them. It's really looking at things around me and thinking, how can I make an impact? We all want to have a footprint of something we can leave behind to make better. And I do believe from myself is that the more we give out to community, we will get that back, in some other format. For me, it's about every breath I have is a breath I want to use to make meaning, to create connection with people. And that's what I'm excited about aged care now and reforms, as you see with the changes to the Act, because one of the things that I'm really interested in, I want to see how does Meaningful Aging Australia support, is that, say, with new providers who come onto the scene, and I want to be a provider of aged care, what can Meaningful Aging Australia support them with? Because I think a lot of people, we realise that care is not just the physical, although we know it's important, but it's also, as you mentioned, the spiritual, and it's what you bring in. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, because I've noticed on your website there are so many affiliated members. So what do these members come to your space for?
Meaningful Aging Australia has a number of tools and resources, but one of the really important things that the organisation achieved is a national guidelines in spirituality or spiritual care in aged care. And what that does is really make it, I guess, practical in how an organisation can deliver care in a much more holistic way that embraces spirituality in that broader sense. And so that looks at an organisation, how they operate from a governance level. How do you incorporate concepts of spirituality, diversity, looking for employment practices, HR? How do you attract people to an organisation that have an inherent sense of compassion and interest in the sector, attracting the right people? Right through to the practical aspects of when someone interacts with an older person, how you actually interact, encouraging an organisation to not just look at a person as a transactional aspect, because we know in aged care, whether that's in-home care or residential care, there are lots of measurements and requirements and recommendations that you have to meet. And sometimes it's difficult to try and meet all those things. If you have to shower, 100 people by a certain time in the day, every day, I guess it would be easy that things creep in, that you're going to focus on that task as opposed to working with each person individually to embrace what is going on for that individual person. And if someone is deciding that, today I don't want to have a shower at 10 o'clock today or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, I actually want to stay in my gym jams today. I want to read. I want to watch Netflix. I want to spend some time talking to my family on the phone. What the national guidelines does is look at those sort of aspects and encourages us to interact with people with compassion, with kindness, with embracing people from a holistic point of view, and recognizing we all have a story, we all have a history, we all have something to offer others. And I think when organisations really embrace those aspects of the national guidelines, an interesting thing happens as a byproduct, Ricky, and that's what I find, just like the two of us talking about broader sense of spirituality, it makes me feel peaceful. We're talking about something that's inherently human.
And I think one of the things that I really got really heavily involved a few years ago is when I became an ambassador for Advanced Care Planning Australia. And it was a hard slog to kind of go to the community and say, this is important, because to understand about our end-of-life care options is something that is quite confronting. Many people don't want to think about it. It's this thing, well, I'll put it off, I don't need to do it now. But why is end-of-life care important, and how does that interplay when it comes to spirituality?
I often, and with my mum's permission before she died, often talk about mum's story, where you know, in this example, I think is a good one to draw on. So mum knew that she was palliative, so cancer had returned. And so we had around 4 months, I would say, before mum's death. And in that process, you know, I would have thought, just like most people, that process of death and dying is quite a difficult conversation. It's very scary. There's fear involved. But through that process, in fact, what I found was actually it was very life-giving, Ricky. There was a great richness. Although I've mentioned a couple of times my own faith, my mum taught me so much during this process because she engaged far more deeply in her own faith as a Catholic. She didn't go to church. There were certainly aspects to her where she actually had some concerns with organised religion, which some people do, and that's a valid thing. But for mum, her connection with God, with her God, was incredibly important. So whilst there was palliative care services, you had medication, and, you know, I take my hat off and have such great respect to all caregivers, and in particular people who work in palliative care, because there's an interesting process that happens at that time where in that palliative space, now we're no longer talking about medical interventions. We're no longer talking about how to heal a body, how to correct something that has occurred in the body, which sometimes can be quite laborious, quite painful, you know, enduring many difficulties along that process. Now we're talking about comfort. We're talking about how to make quality for someone's life. And for my mum during that process, you know, she really deeply connected with her faith. What I noticed, even right up to the moment of her dying, was medication had a certain point where it could give some pain relief. But I witnessed how my mum relaxed and had a sense, another level of comfort and sense of peace when I said her prayers, her Catholic prayers with her. When she spoke to my Buddhist teacher on the phone, who she'd been friends with and knew that was, you know, a very significant, important part. And so what I saw was the importance of faith. It also held me very strongly during this process. What I was able to do was to recognise that this was another stage of life. For me, this was a moment that was there to teach me things, that I was there to have a sense of giving back to a family member, my parent, my mother, someone who gave birth to me. Now I get to actually be there to say goodbye to Mum, but thank her for all that she has done. So I saw that process of having faith as being something that was a healing balm. I saw Mum go through stages of what we might say is kind of a spiritual sort of advancement in a way. Mum became someone who spoke less and less as the process of dying occurs. But what she spoke was much more profound, Ricky. The things that she said were things that were greatly significant, that each breath was not wasted. Just like what you were saying before, Ricky, so beautifully about that you want to make every moment of your life now, every, you know, area and energy that you spend in doing good for the world. I saw that that was very, very much true for my mum in that process. And that was an incredible teaching. That was something I would never give or trade, to see, to be with mum in that process. And you know what? I was not afraid, even though there was pain there for my mum. I knew that in that practice I felt a sense of sacred space. You know, spirituality at this time of life, you know, what I see is the ability to be able to connect to those sources of meaning and connection and purpose, connecting to nature. Mum loved roses, and so we had lots of roses in the room. She had a view that if she could turn, she could see outdoors. She had a priest come and be able to have sacraments with that priest. She could talk to my Buddhist teacher and have a laugh. There was joy. There was restoration. That time of being able to heal wounds. I had time with mum where she was able to share things that she'd never shared, that she'd held back all her life. And so that was, I will call it a sacred space. And, you know, these are kind of rituals and aspects in our lives that are often disconnected from us in Western society. For me to be able to witness that process, to be able to be there, she was returning to where she wanted to be in her beliefs. For me, there was no confusion or disjointedness of me being a Buddhist and mum being Catholic, and my brother who was there, who is atheist. There was no conflict in any of that. We were simply being human beings going through the transition of our life, a stage in our life that we'll all be able to go through. And I think connecting with spirituality, those sources of spirituality, helps us transition. What I'd really love is that we're able to embrace that, Ricky, not just later on when it's our dying moments, that we tap into that as a superpower, as I call it. Way before then, we're at a point when we're aging is we do get to have that experience of being reflective, being able to think about what is the meaning of our life. We recognize sometimes at that point too that there's more years behind us than in front of us potentially. And it's an opportunity for us to recreate ourselves, to feel whole, to embrace that, to connect with our chosen family. All those aspects, the sacredness of life. I love seeing, you see those photos of astronauts looking back at this beautiful sacred blue planet, and they have this moment they talk about of feeling as though, you know, they're a small speck in the universe and how incredible that is. And, you know, we can experience that sometimes in a great mosque or at the footsteps of Uluru. I find that when I'm beside the ocean, that's to me a place which I really feel that sense of awe and wonder. You know, these are things that I think is inherent in all of us. It's like a vitamin that we sometimes don't realize we need, that can help a greater quality to our life. That's all about what we're about, Ricky. And so that's why we do the things that we do. And there's lots of free events Meaningful Aging Australia puts on. We're a charity and non-for-profit. So we try to make sure there's always free events for people, whether that's professionals in the sector or whether that's general public. And we have an amazing conversation series that's coming up with a wonderful woman called Lani Morris.
Oh, okay. How can people find out more about this information?
We'd love people to come to our website and to explore there, to explore the resources and tools. Lots of things on there to just explain a little bit more about spirituality. We're always delighted to talk to people about it. It's our favourite topic.
I notice you've got videos as well that people can, and even organisations that they can really pay for some really interesting experts talking about different aspects. So it's all available. And also you've got a part for newsletters. And I wanted to highlight that for everyone listening, because if people wanted to start to find out more information.
One of the things that we'd really love is to people to join the newsletter. It's free. They can choose whether they'd like to join the professional one or the general public. And we look at a whole range of different things. You know, it might be something we find that we come across that we think is really great to share with others. You know, there was a wonderful series, Red Hand Files, that you might be familiar with. Yes. So, you know, it could be that, or it could be, you know, Nick Cave's writings, which are just incredible. Or it could be, you know, a video of Dadiri, which is, you know, a First Nations practice of meditation and connecting to country. Or it could be, you know, practical things and resources. It could be a conversation series. We'd love for people to connect with that. We're also great advocates for things like, you know, Dying to Know Day. Again, demystifying those aspects of, you know, grief and loss. Also things like Elder Abuse Action Australia. Also Spiritual Care Week and Palliative Care Week, but also, ageism, you know, anti-ageism, looking at embracing aging.
Rachael Wass, it's been an absolute honour and privilege to connect with you face to face. And I've been looking forward to this all day. And I think what a wonderful way to start 2025, the new series, with someone who's so authentic, genuine, who I embrace and embody your authenticity when it comes to care culture. And we'll look forward to working with you in other spaces. Please check out the website, connect with Meaningful Aging Australia, because there are so many wonderful resources that you can tap into through the videos, through the publications they have. Whether you are somebody looking to go into aged care, whether you have a partner, a loved one, whether you are a worker, a new student coming into the space, a nursing student or a doctor, physician, please have a look at Meaningful Aging Australia and join the family. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ricky. I've felt absolutely so comfortable, so honoured to be here, and I too am very grateful to connect in person finally. Thank you so much for inviting me.